this and the organisers in particular. The person I'm introducing is a renowned Israeli journalist, or infamous Israeli journalist, in case might be. Since 1989, Ms. Hass has worked for Haaretz, the Israeli daily newspaper, and since 1993 she's been the correspondent for the occupied territories. Working under the philosophy that if you report about London, you should be in London, and if you report about Paris, you should be in Paris. Amira has lived in Gaza and lived in the West Bank while she's reported on this. She's the author of several books, including Drinking the Sea at Gaza, and numerous articles. Before I hand over to Amira, I just wanted to share a little bit about my experience with Amira's work. As a young man, being just connected to the internet at home, I got up to some pretty naughty stuff at night. I looked up Israeli newspapers and I read Israeli articles. And Amira's articles confused me. Someone going through political puberty, reading Amira's articles, I was confused how an Israeli could have such views. But she was really just the gateway drug. I got on to reading Yuri Avneri and Ilan Pape, and one night, 3 in the morning, bloodshot eyes, my parents found me on the floor overdosing on Ilan Pape. So, you know, rehabilitation included reading Israeli government press releases and the Jerusalem Post. But nevertheless, I learned something very important from Amira's work. It's the importance of dissident views. It opened my mind to the texture of Israeli society, that it is not kind of what I had been brought up to think it was, that there were alternative views within Israeli society, as marginal as they may be, that there are other voices and textures, and I developed an appreciation in that sense. So today, Amira will be talking about how dissidents in Israel and Palestine are treated in the hegemony of Israeli law. So without any further ado, Ms. Amira Hass.
Thank you. Before you speak, is there any way we can question some of the so-called history of the previous speaker before you go on with your side of the politics? Because that was a complete rewrite of history, what we heard the last half hour.
I promise you I'll get to you and you can make a comment or question in the Q&A period of this session. But I will just...
This says Q&A after each speaker.
We're running a little bit behind schedule, but sir, I promise you, I invite both positive and critical comments, and you will have an opportunity to voice your view as well.
Thank you, Andrew, for a nice introduction. And if you allow me, I'll sit. Is it okay? Yeah.
Yes.
When people ask me how come I live in Gaza and now I live in Ramallah and this is forbidden for Israelis to enter, I say that I'm a typical Israeli because I establish facts on the ground. And I do the same here. I see that according to the program, I'm supposed to speak about Palestinian struggle in the Israeli media. I really don't recall I promised such a thing. And maybe I just dismissed it because it's something that I could have talked about in 5 minutes, and I don't think that my contribution should have been very important about the subject. So I do prefer to speak about Palestinian dealing with the Israeli hegemonic law and Israeli dissidents dealings with the Israeli hegemonic law. There is a sentence that I often hear from Palestinians when I go and interview them in several occasions. And they say, so where is the law? Where is Israeli law? Or they say, Israel says there is a rule of law. So where is it? How can they do this to me? Or people would say, there is no law in Israel. And those people who say such things could be a person who just got a demolition order of a shack that he had built. or a person whose land was taken and now there is a joyous Israeli settlement house on his land, or a woman that in her community Israeli soldiers came and destroyed, demolished a water cistern, or a worker that all of a sudden, worker in Israel, who all of a sudden his permit to work in Israel was revoked without explanation. If I had the whole day here, I would not have exhausted the list of examples of Palestinians that face every day this black hole of Israeli arbitrariness and cruelty. Of course, I know that the question that they ask me is rhetorical. And still, even though I keep hearing it, it's always very touching, this question. It's touching to hear it from people who were born into Israeli occupation. They didn't know a day in their life out of occupation. And their families, their parents and grandparents, have been living under military rule for almost 50 years. For me, when people ask me this question, it is an indication that they still identify, or they do identify, law with justice. For them, it's an automatic equation. And there is something even beyond that equation of law and justice. It's an expectation that somewhere Israelis, judges, officials will finally wake up and realize how absurd and how obscene their acts of cruelty and arbitrariness are. So there is a very compassionate expectation that those who do wrong will wake up to understand how illogical it is. So I'm always embarrassed and surprised when I hear these statements from Palestinians that I interview. And what I try to say is that, yes, there is a law in Israel, there is the rule of law in Israel, but one should not confuse law with justice and rights. In this place of students of law and professors of law, I speak in my capacity as a laywoman, totally laywoman. And I owe my knowledge and my understanding to Palestinians in the occupied territory, among whom I've been living for the past 20 years. And this work and this life with Palestinians and work and coverage of the occupation has been always involved in attending court sessions and close reading of laws and military orders. So this is my knowledge of law. And I must confess, in spite of all those many hours that I've spent in Israeli courts and military courts and high courts and reading those military orders and new laws, I often find the Gothic, or let me say, the Gothic legal formulations are very often beyond my comprehension. Why complicate things something which is so simple as right or wrong, something which is so logical as fairness? More often do I find legal proceedings, when it comes to Palestinians, humiliating and demeaning, the incarnation of masculine, national, and capitalist domination. I really don't understand how some lawyers can tolerate this and do it every day and every day and every day, go to the Israeli military court or to High Court of Justice and face this hegemony over and over again. So over the years of coverage, my understanding of law has only, as a tool in the hands of the strong and the mighty, has only been confirmed. It is a tool to perpetuate hegemony as much as it is an expression of the strength of hegemonic powers at the stage that the law was formulated. Let me be very strict about this, or very clear about this, that Israel has not invented it. It's not just about Israel that I'm talking. And you as Australians who must know something about your history you probably agree with me and can quote better than me, a series of laws that have institutionalized and perpetuated the primary dispossession of your indigenous people. But I'm an Israeli, so that's my concern. My concern is our indigenous people. One of those laws that express hegemonic power and strength is the Israeli law of return. Now, this law of return guarantees that, for example, any Jew here in this room, at any moment, has more rights in the country, in the Holy Country, or Palestine, or Israel, Greater Israel, has more rights than any Palestinian, Any moment, any Jew in this room can go, travel to Israel, enter without problem, except of some who are critical, of course, very critical, go naturalize in a matter of few days, vote in a matter of few days, find housing, choose housing wherever he or she wants, in Tel Aviv and in the settlement of Bet El, in this side of the Green Line, on the other side of the Green Line, can work there, can invest, can buy land, can establish a factory, can marry without anybody, and with subsidies and encouragement and tax exemptions. While Palestinians, if they are lucky, Palestinians who live outside the country, if they are lucky and they are allowed in, they are immediately restricted in their freedom of movement. They certainly cannot settle in the country, even if they are parents, even if their family has property there, even if their family has property inside the West Bank, not just inside Israel. Palestinians from the West Bank cannot travel to Tel Aviv without a permit. Needless to say, they cannot settle in Tel Aviv. An Australian Jew can settle in Bet El. A Palestinian from Ramallah cannot live in Tel Aviv. Palestinians in Gaza cannot really marry somebody from the West Bank, for the simple reason that Israel does not give a permit to go from Gaza to the West Bank, etc., etc. The list is very long and we are running short of time. So this is one of the laws, one of many, that create the hegemony and that create a reality of, how I would say it, of two peoples who live in the same country but are one government dictates the unequal development for each people in the same territory, and call it whatever, give it a definition that you want, but this is the reality. Now, the Israeli court system protects this law and protects all the other laws that guarantee Jewish hegemony and guarantee or institutionalize and develop and continue the expropriation of Palestinian land and the concentration of Palestinians in enclaves, both on both sides of the West Bank, or on both sides of the Green Line. So in this context, Israeli law, be it military or civilian, the military law applied in the West Bank, the Israeli law does not leave a choice but to break it. Breaking the law is a must practice of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. All my friends, all my Palestinian friends are criminals. I mean, you cannot be, in Hebrew we have a nicer word for criminal. Criminal is a bit harsh, but in Hebrew we have the word avarian, which is nicer. So we joke among ourselves that they are all avarianim, transgressors. So let me give you examples of how easily it is to become a criminal under Israeli law. There are more than 12,000 demolition orders that have been accumulated in Area C of the West Bank. This is around 62% of the West Bank. The Palestinians were obliged to build all sorts of very simple constructions without the permit from the Israeli authorities. This Area C is under full Israeli control. It was supposed to be so only for 5 years, but as we know, everything temporary becomes permanent. So Israel gives the permit or does not give the permit, and in 99%, so 99.99, it doesn't give a permit for Palestinians to build. The Palestinians live and have children and want to improve their conditions, and they want to build. And when they cannot build, when they do not get a permit, they build without a permit. So these 12,000 demolition orders maybe represent at least 15,000 structures. Shacks, it's not fancy houses, and animal sheds, and maybe cisterns, water cisterns, because there is no, Israel does not allow many of those communities in Area C to connect to the infrastructure grid. So instead people dig cisterns in order to collect water, rainwater, but this is illegal. So it's even illegal to drink from the cistern, water cistern, another form of criminality. Mobile toilets also, people install mobile toilets. This is also forbidden according to Israeli law there in Area C. So we have at least 50,000 criminals who are involved in this illegal activity. We have thousands of others in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, who build their homes without a permit. Because in East Jerusalem there is a long tradition of preventing Palestinian development and construction. So here is another group of criminals in East Jerusalem. Tens of thousands of Palestinians cross the Green Line every day without a permit in order to find work in Israel. They risk imprisonment and heavy fines, and yet they do it because they have to send their children to school and to universities and to attend to their aging parents. Tens of thousands of Palestinians who were born maybe in the West Bank and then left the West Bank, and Israel revoked their status of residency in the West Bank, found ways to return as visitors, as tourists over the years, and then overstayed. They broke the law and overstayed even though their visa was only for 3 months. They remained. They were criminals as well. There are Gazans who are not allowed to go from Gaza to the West Bank, and they found ways, very often by falsifying some paper, and this is known, or maybe paying some bakshish to some Israeli official, and they got a permit to go for 2 days to the West Bank, and they remained in the West Bank. And they are also criminals according to Israeli laws. This is a phenomenon of mass felony, and it tells us not about the people, not about those avaryanim, about those criminals, but about the law. Each person and each such breaking the law tells us about an individual decision to break the law. And this individual decision is taken by the majority among the Palestinians. This is what I call resilience, defiance, sumud, steadfastness. This is a decision, an individual decision. This is an individual decision to struggle by breaking the law of the occupier. Nobody orders the people to behave so. It is not a party decision. It is not a decision from above, imposed from above. And people are fully aware of the consequences and are ready to pay the price for not cooperating with the oppressive law. And indeed, in the cases that I just mentioned, we see that some of those, sometimes breaking the law, this individual mass breaking of the law, bears fruits. The authorities, the Israeli authorities cannot really keep up the pace and demolish all structures. And some of those structures have the demolition orders for many years, and they are only succeeding in postponing the verdict or the sentence. The permits to Israel, just lately, Israeli authorities decided to allow men above the age of 55 and women above the age of 50 to enter Israel without permits. So they have to go the screening through the checkpoints, and of course political activists and other cannot do that, will not be allowed, but a very important group of people uses this in order to look for work in Israel. Yes, I know men who are 55 years old and go to work in construction in Israel in order to raise the family. Even if they can be already grandfathers and their children do not find work. Overstaying, the people who have overstayed, tens of thousands of Palestinians who overstayed and lived illegally in the West Bank, always in the danger of being deported to a place, to a no place, because they don't have any other papers. So eventually Israel had to agree to issue them to them through negotiations with the PA, to issue them identity cards or the recognition that they are Palestinians in the West Bank. On the other hand, while we see this phenomenon of breaking the law, mass breaking and refusal to cooperate with this oppressive law, on the other hand, we see that over the past 40 years, there has been a consistent cooperation with military courts and with the military law that is connected to military courts. The military law, as I said, applies in the West Bank and in Gaza until 2005. And probably about 800,000 Palestinians have passed through these military courts over the past 48 years. The figures always vary, but all of them were detained and sentenced, and then put on trial and sentenced and spent time in jail and in different periods of time in jail. But the great majority of those prisoners, of those detainees, of those defendants decided to cooperate and to have lawyers that will deal with the military court and with this military court. There have been attempts over the years to call for a total boycott of Israeli military courts, but under the pressure of families, of Palestinian families, the same families that might break the law when they go and work in Israel. So under the pressure of Israel for Palestinian families, Palestinians continue to cooperate with the military court. Not only that, Palestinians, the judges very often, apart from imposing prison sentences to felonies which are usually political and security related, of activity against the occupation, so they impose fines on Palestinians, and the Palestinians pay the fines. In the time that there are calls for BDS, for boycott, for sanctions, thousands of Palestinians every year pay millions of dollars which go directly to the Israeli budget. 2 years ago, I published the sum that I received of 2012, I believe it was, that Palestinians paid around $18 million, or 18 million shekel, or 16, I don't remember, in 2012, just of fines. There was a little bit, you know, once it's published, there is a little bit of commotion, and the then Minister of Prisoners Affairs announced that since June of that year, Palestinians will stop paying the fines, so they will extend their imprisonment time. But guess what? The families refuse. They don't want. They prefer that the fine be paid and the kids return home earlier. This is a contradiction, of course, and one would expect people who join the political and military activity against occupation to understand the importance and the political potential of not giving legitimacy to the military courts and to the military judges, and to confuse the military system. For example, if they created bottlenecks in detention camps, they would have confused the system. It's so strange that so many people are taking risks, breaking the law. So why are they afraid of this, okay, some extra inconvenience connected to a longer imprisonment? They are activists of the popular struggle, of the villages, of the popular struggle committees, who decide to have a real battle at military court. Now, real legal battle at military court means that the lawyers call for witnesses. Very often, people prefer not to call for witnesses and not to have a due process, because the time that the due process takes, mostly in felonies such as throwing stones or political groupings, and I'm not talking about the big, the heavy indictments, such as killing. So mostly in such cases, people or demonstrations, people can remain in jail for much longer than the sentence would have been if they didn't have if they didn't call the witnesses. So people prefer to have deals with the prosecution and admit they are say that they are guilty, admit guilty, and then spend time in jail. Now there are some activists who decided to defy this, and also children and parents to children who were arrested mostly in order to get from the children information about others who are active in the those villages against the Israeli occupation. And there are lawyers who are dedicated to this, and they indeed confuse the military court, because this means to call every soldier who claimed that a certain child threw a stone, or a certain person did something terrible as throwing a stone at the wall, or waving the Palestinian flag in front of a soldier. So you bring the soldiers and you start a process, and you spend time, and you spend the money of the military system. But very few are ready to take this course, and to really challenge and to really annoy the military court in such a way. The great majority still prefer to have deals, to pay the fine, to have the deals, to sit as little as possible in jail and go home. Now why? This is a question that everybody who is interested in the Palestinian struggle and resistance should ask. Palestinians, of course, ask it among themselves, and I think that pro-Palestinians outside of Palestine are also allowed to ask these questions. I believe that there are some answers to this question. In the 70s, when the first Palestinians were started to be put to trial in their hundreds, because of course, as something natural, they confronted the occupation, the Israeli occupation, with resistance. Still, everybody thought that it was temporary, that occupation was temporary. So cooperation with, or going to military court looked one of the natural, okay, like you go through you obey to a soldier who is in the middle of the road, you also go to military court. Nobody thought that it would last so long. It would last 50 years, almost 50 years. According to the international law that that you are familiar more than myself, such a long occupation is is not being conceived. With time, it became a routine going to military court, a routine of Palestinian life, and also an industry, because there are hundreds, if not more, of lawyers, both Israelis, who are both Arabs and Jews, and Palestinian lawyers, who, we must say, make a living out of it. So you have a group of lawyers that don't find a reason to advise their clients not to cooperate with military court. PLO, as the representative of the inalienable representative of the Palestinian people, or the sole representative of the Palestinian people, does not really exist anymore as a political structure. It does not exist as a political leader that can initiate a dramatic change, even if this dramatic change is so needed. Nobody will listen to an order or to instruction from the PLO in that sense. Every decision of an individual to fight against the occupation is, in these circumstances now, an individual decision. It is not like it was maybe in the 70s or the 80s, part of a natural enrollment in a movement, in an organization. The great majority have a very a spontaneous decision, and the preparation, there is very poor preparation in the Palestinian organizations when it comes to activity against the occupation. And the activity that Israel labels as security, and it is political and with the use of force. No, I will talk more than 5 minutes. Sorry. And once in court, because, look, I say it because I think it is, because the people here are converted, the great majority. And I think that this is important information for people who are converted.
This is propaganda, what you're doing. You
represent
a left-wing
yes. Okay.
Which, you know,
so because there is no real preparation for the struggle that brings people to military courts, except maybe of those activists of the villages, because there is no real preparation, because there is no sense of movement, of being part of a movement, every Palestinian who is in court feels an individual, and that's why he makes the calculations as an individual. Hamas and Jihad, these two organizations, do not adhere to the methods of popular resistance, unarmed resistance. And a decision to disturb the work of military court is part of unarmed resistance. So they are not going to encourage their members to adhere to such or to choose such a way. So if not all prisoners adopt a certain unified policy, it cannot be effective. And then there is the individual family and its wishes that are always stronger than the political awareness and the position of the organizations. And there is another factor that the PA has adjusted over the years to act along the status quo and with the status quo with the Israeli authorities. The very work of the PA is based on the assumption of cooperation with the status quo. So it is afraid to challenge it and to disrupt it. and it is afraid to encourage the prisoner, the detainees, to act differently. So in this reality, individual resilience is not translated to strategized resistance. It is directed from above, and that can gain the support of the people and the trust of the people. People can imagine to take risks as an individual choice, but not as a part of a movement. Now, I have another part, but I can stop it now. I can stop now.
Yes. You can maybe make some extra points.
Okay, I have another part about the Israeli, about going to High Court, and why going to High Court, even though High Court is has a very bad record in terms of fighting in terms of challenging Israeli policies in the occupied territory.
Maybe you can make that final point, and then we'll move on to comments and questions. The Israeli High Court, its track record.
Okay, I think that this sentence is enough. Still, Israelis choose it because, mostly because they are encouraged to do it by Palestinian individuals and by human rights organizations that to challenge Israeli policies through High Court. Sometimes it may improve an individual situation of a person. For example, going to High Court against the construction of the wall far away from the Green Line. This has succeeded in several occasions. With a lot of media, with a lot of struggle, para-court, not only in court, but this has worked. It worked sometimes when some outposts, unauthorized outposts, the Israeli High Court ordered to dismantle them. But this is when it could be proven that they are on private land, Palestinian private land. High Court refuses to challenge the principles of settlements as violation of international law and the right of Palestinians to have public land, not just private land.
Is that because these are political decisions and the court shies away from being involved?
It is political, but because it does not dare and does not intend to challenge the basic of dispossession. So when it has the dispossession is the basic in Israel is that the land belongs to the Jews. So any land that is defined as public land is automatically seen as Jewish land. So High Court does not challenge it. And there are also why going to High Court where there are so many disappointments with High Court, and there were several just this last week or 2 weeks ago. I think it also has to do with self-interest of some lawyers who can have a better chance to get noticed and develop their skills and litigation skills and probably money. This always exists. But very often, and it's true mostly about Israeli lawyers, while everybody recognizes that law is a tool of the hegemon, an hegemonic tool, it is not just this. It is also a legitimate and possible battlefield to increase or to expand the emancipatory struggle. So this is not only a tool. But the problem, and this is my last sentence, the problem is that as long as there is no general political decision by the Palestinian trusted leadership, to boycott all Israeli institutions, including military courts, including civil courts, the individuals need to go to courts and to High Court because they cannot be left without any defense and any hope.
Thank you very much. the way we're going to do this is we'll have 3 at a time. I ask you to please limit your comment or question to a minute, even though you might feel like you need more time to really express yourself. Please try and be direct with your questions. As promised, sir, you can put your views on record.
Firstly, I've sat through 1.5 hours of the greatest load of propaganda I've ever heard. And for all you people, let me ask you, I'll come to the question.
Sure.
Amira mentioned the fact that Area C was designated by the abomination known as the Oslo Accords as pure Israeli. There was A, B and C, all part of the West Bank broken up, which was always Judea and Samaria. However, West C, the Area C that you referred to, was supposed to be purely Israeli. The European Union came and built on that land illegally, and they were torn down. Some of them were torn down. There's 500 there at the moment, as the last count from Reykjavik, not 15,000 that you mentioned. And if I had my way, they would be torn down the moment those European Union trucks came rolling through from Ramallah. But the other thing is, and you talked also about, and people are just here just like sponges, they listen to everything you say. Some poor guy can't come to Tel Aviv and work from Gaza. There's a reason for that. And the reason is terrorism. There's suicide bombings going on. And a country will be...
Thank you, sir. That's 1 minute.
And I want to also talk to the other guy too. There's a complete rewrite of history. I'm going to get up there and count on the last 1.5 hours with 15 minutes of just talking.
So I'm very sorry, we can only have 1 minute per person. I appreciate your comments and thank you.
I know, but what I'm saying is, I've sat through 1.5 hours. These people deserve to see.
Is there another question or comment?
I think people should identify themselves. Excuse me, can people identify themselves when they speak? Because I think we'd like to know who's here and
if you choose
on
to,
what
you can
behalf.
identify yourself.
And I think that's important.
My name is
So who are you?
My name's Gil Solomon and I write things all over the place.
What's your name? Gil Solomon?
That's right.
Sorry,
Thank you.
the floor's with Lisa.
Well, she doesn't answer my question then about Area C.
Amira, would you like to answer the question?
Lisa.
Lisa?
Yes, thank you, Amir. Having spent years myself in the Israeli military courts and written a book on the topic, I found much of everything what you said extremely familiar, and it was, the one question I would have for you is, just yesterday it was reported that the UN Commission on the Rights of Children had issued a very critical report on continuing Israeli torture and abuse of Palestinian children. Since I haven't been following the military courts very closely since about 2005, and considering the High Court decision in 1999, could you briefly comment on the degree to which torture is or is not still used? Has it been significantly changed in recent years since the decision of the 1999 High Court decision outlawing the routine use of moderate physical pressure?
Thank you. And is there a third comment or question before we Amira answer?
Kathy Peters, just following on from that one, could you talk about the use of summary execution as a standard procedure within the Israeli military?
Okay, Mr. Solomon's comment, Lisa's question on children, and the question at the back about summary execution.
Okay. We will need 3 hours to reply just to the, how would I call it, fantasies that are related to what you said about Area C. We don't have these 3 hours. Area C.
Don't refer to my comment.
Area C.
Finally, watch what you say.
You refer to it as propaganda.
If we can just have a bit of quiet and allow Ms. Hass to make her comment.
When Israel and the Palestinians signed on the Oslo Accords and had the negotiations in '95, Israel forced on the Palestinians to accept the division of the West Bank into 3 categories, A, B, and C. A being 4% of the land, Palestinian cities, where Palestinian Authority got immediate civilian authority, and policing authority, not security authority, but the authority, the authority of for their policemen to go with weapons. Area B, which is the villages, would the Palestinian Authority got the permission to, or the authority to handle civilian affairs, such as handling land, giving permits to construction, etc. And Area C, where Israel, and in Area B, Palestinians have no policing authorities. Their police, if they are police is present there, they are not allowed to carry arms. And if they need to carry arms, they need a permit from Israel to enter the Area B. Area C is under full Israeli control for the gradual time, and that's where Israeli army should have done gradual redeployment. Now, it happened until 1999. Until 1999, Area C shrank gradually. It was first 80%, then it shrank gradually. It was never said that it is forever an Israeli territory. It is the territory where Israeli civilian authorities continue to be exercised until it is given to the Palestinians according to the Accords. This should have been done in 5 years.
Not according to us.
And this one, I'm sorry, Mr. Regavim, the head of Regavim, lives in an unauthorized, an illegal settlement. I mean, all settlements are illegal, but he lives also in an unauthorized one, and he gives you his information. So that's, I mean, we cannot tell you what people to choose from, whom to choose to take information. But Area C, according to Oslo Accords, should have been transferred after 5 years, should have been the Palestinian cooperation. No, you're right in one thing, that Israel, you're right in one thing, and in one thing that Israel, it was a trick by Israeli officials in order not to pass in order to grab most of the land of the West Bank. This is true. This was a trick because while there was nobody forces Israel to redeploy and to withdraw, it can last forever. And Israel can expand the settlements in Area C as it wishes, even though most of the world understood that Israel agrees to the two-state solution. But Israel did everything possible since it signed on the Oslo Accords to foil the two-state solution. That's why you can speak in such yeah. Sure. Now, as for torture, there is the issue of treatment of children and torture. Now, the treatment there is torture which is done in order to take information from detainees or to frighten them or to deter them, and torture that is forbidden by law, by international law, and also so it was by Israeli law and Israeli court decision. And there is treatment of children that borders or that can be defined as torture, such as arresting them in the middle of the night, frightening them in order to extract information from them, such as throwing them on the floor of the jeeps when they are being arrested, and slapping them during their shipment from home to, in the middle of the night, to the interrogation centers, by frightening them in the investigation, by not bringing a parent or a lawyer, by not allowing them to see a lawyer. All this, when it comes to children, especially when it comes to children, because of their age, of course, is defined as torture. But it should not be confused with the torture that we talk when we talk about adults, which is very hurtful, very hurtful positions, and the prevention of sleep. There is also with children, of course, because there is in order to quell to repress the struggle campaigns or the campaigns in villages, certain villages in the West Bank, against the Israeli army and against nearby Israeli settlements, the Israeli army, of course, has to use methods of all different methods. One of them is to threaten children and to extract information. Very often we find that the information that children give is very unreliable because they just want to end this ordeal. In the past year, since last May, when the 3 Israeli kids, who 2 of them are settlers, were kidnapped by members of Hamas, the rate of torture that was also forbidden by Israeli courts, the rate of torturing detainees has increased. And a colleague of mine of Haaretz made an investigation, and he found out that in great majority of this there was no correlation between, let's say, the seriousness of the indictment and the torture and the methods of torture.
If I just may ask, obviously there's evidence that this might be taking place. Is there legal accountability that comes forth? Is anyone held accountable for this conduct?
No, usually there are some ways there are organizations that file complaints, but
is there anything like a government commission that can be held into these?
There is a committee that investigates. It should investigate within the Ministry of Justice. Yes. But the great majority, if we take the complaints of one of the an Israeli organization against torture, the great majority, I don't remember now the rate, but the great majority of complaints are not being really investigated to process.
The last question, if you want to put
yes.
the idea of summary execution. Obviously, there's no actual law or policy that justifies this, but there are instances of people being killed without trial.
I would say, yeah, you asked about summary execution as standard. I wouldn't say that now it is standard. There were periods when it was used, of course, during the Second Intifada, during from the start of the Second Intifada, actually, there was assassinations of Palestinians, not in combat, both in the West Bank and in Gaza. And I can say from my own experience, very often these assassinations that were meant to quell the Intifada in its beginning did the opposite. And these first 2 ones were Fatah, members of Fatah in the West Bank, and after that, after they were assassinated, and we don't know, I mean, they were not brought to trial, and so we don't know. They had no way to defend or to say what they were.
Just from memory, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the assassination policy went to the Israeli High Court in 2007, and
yes.
The High Court said, okay, it's a justifiable policy within certain parameters.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The practicalities of how those parameters would work are very hard to fathom and to police, but the assassination policy is still technically on the table and legal.
They are. All the wars in Gaza involve these assassinations of Palestinians. Right now, it doesn't exist in the West Bank. In the West Bank, it has stopped. So, I'm confused. I'm troubled by the word standard because it did stop in the West Bank, and it did stop now in Gaza. So it's not that it's, but the Israelis sees it as a legitimate tool to fight Palestinian resistance. Yes.
I just wanted to make the point that a lot of unarmed Palestinians are shot by snipers or just shot with tear gas canisters or shot in any way.
Look, you have to differentiate between summary execution. I mean, it's...
yes, using
You
the
have
term
to-
very
to-
loosely, I
to-
guess,
yes,
that
there
if
is. There are
someone's...
the
yes.
assassinations of people who are targeted, and
Yes.
and this is summary execution.
Yes.
And there are the killing of I think that last year there were more than 37 just in the West Bank of either demonstrators or people who are near the fence. I covered last week a child who went to pick up a tube, I don't know the name of, in English, a thistle, something like that, a plant for eating. And he went to pick it up, and the place where there is much of this plant, it's for poor families who depend on things that grow wild. And he just crossed the fence a few meters, still on the land of his village, and soldiers killed him. So, and he was one of at least 5 children, I think. People.
Yeah, we're going to have one more question,
Okay.
and then
Let me finish. At least 5 children who were shot at under the age of 15. I don't remember the exact numbers, but who were shot at by soldiers that there was no danger to their life.
last question.
I recognize that there isn't much time, but I'll make a very fast comment slash question, if you allow it. Just to tie up the question of the children detainees, and to bring it back to the call for boycotts and boycotting and not paying the fines. I think it's important to understand that the boycott call is more of a solidarity call for the people on the outside. We don't have the same expectations from the people on the inside, although I agree with your point that at least the factions need to have clear support or something like that. But, you know, given that there's 700 to 1,000 children that are being detained every year by the Israeli authorities, given that I myself being a parent, it's a very difficult call to make to not pay a fine and bring your child home at the end of the day. So there's more complexity, I think.
Of course. So I tell you what is more complexity. It is very much a class issue. The 700 to 1,000 children who find themselves in jail because they threw stones and confronted the Israeli army by throwing stones are very often from the poorer parts of the Palestinian society. So it's true, very often it's villages and refugee camps who are facing Israeli army much more than people in the cities. But there are also extra reasons why those children go to throw stones. It can be problems at home, it can be sometimes the wish to help, even help the family, because the family gets some money from the PA when the kid is arrested, so they give a monthly salary. So if the Palestinian society wants to deal with the issue of child arrests, they also have to ask the question, how come it is such a class phenomenon, and what are the extra reasons the children go, not the only occupation reasons, that children go to throw stones. I've spoken to quite a few children and to their parents. It's fashion, it's mode, it's boredom, it's frustration. There are many other reasons. Now, the Palestinian society has to ask, do we want an organized, a strategized struggle, or do we want an individualized struggle also? And of course, I agree with you that it is, and when I talked about the fines, I didn't mean necessarily the children, I meant the grown-ups. Still, there are many adults who are asked to pay fines, and they pay the fines. And if you take BDS as the example of the South Africa, we know that in South Africa, the boycott and sanctions, and the boycott was also from within, not only outside.
Thank you very much. I thank everyone for their contributions to this session. We could talk all day, and I'm sure everyone's got questions, and I apologize if we didn't get to your question. So please join me in thanking Ms. Amira Hass.